Now, tonight we are taking up one line as a master key. One line that, if you let it penetrate beyond the ears, ends the civil war inside your own breast. I live, yet not I. Mark this well, because this is going to be a very, very important point in your life if you catch it. Peace does not begin when that personal I of yours gets a little better behaved, a little more moral, a little more efficient. No. Peace begins where that personal I stops claiming center stage, stops insisting on being cause, controller, protector, provider, stops existing as the axis of your concern. I live, yet not I. Do you see what this is saying? It is not poetry. It is a state of consciousness. Now do not misunderstand what I am saying. I am not inviting you to become blank, passive, spineless, irresponsible. I am not asking you to abdicate your duties or fail to show up for your post. I am stating a spiritual fact. When the strain of being a self-originating person drops, when the anxious manager in you retires, something remains that lives you. Something actual, present, intelligent. You discover, not invent, that life is already living as you. Do you follow that? You are not invited into a void. You are being called out of pretense into reality. We will go deeply into the logic of this. But first, feel the shock of it. For years you have tried to perfect the I, to discipline it, adorn it, educate it, secure it, feed it, defend it. And yet, with all that labor, has it given you the rest your heart craves? Be honest. That I has been a restless general at war with its own troops. I live, yet not I, is the armistice. It is the white flag that appears not through defeat, but through revelation. The recognition that the separate I was a role without substance, a mask worn so long it bit into the skin. Now, what then remains when the mask loosens? Who pays the bills? Who loves the child? Who meets the day? Listen closely. The same life that hung the stars and pushes sap through winter wood, the same presence that is izing, being, expressing, assumes its rightful function as your life. Not God and you, but God as you. Not you asking power to come. Power already present, already the fabric of your being, showing forth as wisdom, as right action, as sufficiency. Do you see that? So here is our question for the whole of this work. If the personal self fades, what remains, and why is it safer than the old way? We will answer not with slogans, but with realization, with the practiced recognition of presence. For now, let this be planted. Peace is not the crown placed upon a successful ego. Peace is the climate of not I, the stillness that arrives when the center shifts from a private claimant to the infinite that is. Acquaint thyself with him, and be at peace. As is and am, so you live, yet not you. Now, at this very point, there rises up that terrible, terrible word. But I have a family. But I have bills. But my body hurts. But there is war. But the news is a parade of injustice. But there is disease that frightens me in the night. And that but, if you let it, will talk you right back into the old harness and close the gate. Now mark this well, because this is going to be a very, very important point in your life if you catch it. The but belongs to the personal I. It is the voice of the manager who fears that if he sets down the clipboard for 5 minutes, the universe will fall into a heap. Do you see that? Underneath all your beautiful reasons, is one crude assumption. I, this private me, am the only protector I have. If I let go, I will be exposed. If I stop steering, I will crash. And therefore, the very announcement of "not I" sounds like peril, not freedom. Don't ever misunderstand what I am saying. I am not inviting irresponsibility. I am not telling you to leave your child unfed or your ledger unbalanced. I am saying that the sense of a separate controller never did the feeding, never did the balancing, never produced peace. It promised you control and paid you in tension. Constant vigilance, constant defense of reputation, constant chasing of outcomes. It kept you on a leash and called it safety. Now watch how subtle this is. Even your spirituality, oh yes, even this work, can be co-opted by that same I. It prays not to commune, but to bargain. God, give me better conditions. God, fix this person. God, secure my future. And by that very petition, it enthrones the I again as the center, as the asker, as the worrier in chief. And it postpones peace for the next improved circumstance. Do you see that? As long as the I seeks, the I remains, and with it, the old strain. But how can I ignore pain and war? Wait a minute. Who told you to ignore? We are not in the business of closing eyes. We are in the business of opening them. The but cannot be answered by clever debate because the but is riding on a false premise about reality. It assumes two, God and something else. It assumes two powers, spirit and a competitor. It assumes two selves, God and you. Now, if God is infinite, where would there be room for a second self to run your life or defend it? How could there be another law to frighten you? Just as the tracks seem to meet in the distance, just as the sky seems to rest on the mountain, the but is a picture in thought, persuasive but lawless. So our answer will not be verbal wrestling. Our answer is a turning, a rebasing of consciousness upon what is, not upon what seems. We will take up the logic of as, is, and am. And then we will practice communion until the premise shifts and the but falls of its own weight. Then you will act, speak, love, and serve, yes, but not out of a frightened center. You will find that life itself has the helm, and you rest while it steers. No, let us do exactly that. Let us take the premise that undercuts the but at its root. If God is infinite being, now mark this well, if God is infinite, where is a second anything to stand next to infinity? Where could it fit? How could there be God and a competitor, God and an opposing law, God and another self? There could be none, and there is none. The word infinite leaves no margin, no boundary, no outside. Do you see that? Therefore, the only way you can use the word God meaningfully is as all presence, all power, all substance, all law, and all life. Not much of God, not most of God, not a big God in a big heaven. God infinite here. Now take this from the clouds and bring it to the kitchen table. There is not glass and a tumbler. There is glass formed as a tumbler. There is not mahogany and a table. There is mahogany expressed as a table. The substance is one. The form is its mode of appearing. So there is not God and you. There is God expressed as you. There is not life and a collection of separate lives. There is life as individualized being. Do you see that? This is not poetry. This is logic. Substance and form. As and is and am. So we have as and we have is. God is. God is ising all the time, being. And God forms as individual expression, as. Therefore, the word that comes to your lips, am, is not the announcement of a private self obtaining an existence apart from God. No. Am is recognition. I am because God is, and God is appearing as. As is and am. As is and am. When you grasp that, the ground under the butt falls away. For what is there to defend if there is not a second self? What is there to prop up, to worry over, to ensure, if identity is God being as you? Don't ever misunderstand what I'm saying. This does not erase individuality. It erases separation. The tumbler does not stop being a tumbler because it is glass. It becomes safer as glass, because its life is the life of its substance. You do not become a faceless blur. Your gifts, your tone, your color, your function are preserved and heightened, because their source is recognized as God and not as a frightened personal manager. Is that right? The form is unique. The life is one. Now, if the personal I is simply the mental sense of being a self apart, a second center trying to be what only infinity already is, then not I is not death. It is the end of a mistaken premise. It is the ceasing of a ghost occupation. When the pretense yields, something remains. Presence, life, peace itself, living as you, through you, in you. And because infinity leaves no room for a rival self, there is no second law to fear, no second power to placate, no second will to battle. There is God, as, is, am. And in that realized oneness, the war ends before it can begin. Acquaint thyself with him, and be at peace. Do you see that? Now let us take the light we have and shine it upon the oldest story you and I were ever told. In the very first chapter of Genesis, you have a creation that is finished, full, declared good and very good. That is the true creation, spirit as all, completeness as the nature of being. But then, almost as a second book, there appears another account. A man formed of dust, put into a garden, falling into a deep sleep. Please mark this well. That second story is not history. It is allegory. It is the picture of what happens in consciousness when we accept a sense of ourselves as something other than God being. And notice, in that second account, nobody ever wakes up. The point of our work is to awaken. Now, what is that second creation in plain terms? It is the moment we set up a fellow named me. We put our name on a little throne and say, now I must run my life. I must get, keep, defend, and compare. My body, my money, my reputation, my future. Do you see how quickly the catalog opens? Having posited a self apart, we inherit its necessities. Fear because something can threaten me. Lack because something is outside and scarce. Rivalry because others can take what I need. Resentment because the world will not behave for my sake. Pride because I must announce my worth. The whole anxious industry rises the minute we believe ourselves outside of infinity. Is that right? Don't ever misunderstand what I'm saying. Your individuality is not the problem. The problem is the belief of separation that forces you to live like an orphan in a universe that is actually your home. The mechanics are cruel but simple. If I think life is out there and I am in here, then every breath becomes a negotiation. I must secure my body from disease, my years from time, my job from loss, my relationships from betrayal, my image from criticism. Locks and ledgers, plans and punishments, vitamins and vengeance. An endless program of self-protection and self-promotion. And with all of it comes the strain. We call it adulthood and responsibility, but much of it is the fatigue of a hypothesis. A second self trying to do the work that only infinity can do. Do you see that? Scripture tells it again as the prodigal. We are that younger son who takes his share, his I, me, mine, and journeys into a far country of self-ownership. Not doing too well, are we? There is always a famine in that country because the separate I cannot feed itself on its own shadow. And then a holy mercy, hunger. The pain itself becomes the wake-up bell. He came to himself, the text says. He remembered home, not as a place on a map, but as a state of being. I am not a part, I am of. And the Father? Never moved, never withheld, never punished. The robe, the ring, the shoes, identity, authority, sonship, were always his, obscured only by the belief that he was a self apart. Now, here is the relief, and you must catch it. The second creation is not a person to be perfected. It is a belief to be abandoned. You cannot reform a mirage into water. You cannot diet, decorate, or discipline a mistaken premise into reality. You do not kill the personal I. You see through it as you would see through the sky resting on the mountain. It never had law. It only had your consent. Therefore, the return is not laborious travel. It is relinquishment. I live, yet not I. There is not God and me. There is God as me. Start watching for the moment you set up a fellow, and in that very instant, turn. Say within yourself, gently but with authority, home in thee. Then watch what happens to fear, to rivalry, to the stinging need to manage. The climate changes. Peace does not arrive from outside. It appears from within because the imposter has stepped aside. Do you see that? Now we must take up a point that, if you grasp it, removes the last argument for keeping the personal manager on duty. Error has no law. Now mark this well. By error, I do not mean a naughty person or a wicked power. I mean an appearance in consciousness, a hypnotic suggestion, a mental picture that asserts itself as if it had cause, substance, and law, and has none. None. It is like looking at the car tracks in the distance and swearing they meet. They appear to. They never do. It is like standing on the beach and being very sure there is an edge to the world out there at the horizon. Sailors once refused to sail beyond it. How could they? The picture said danger. But the picture was not a fact. It was a way of seeing. Do you see that? Stand at the foothills, and you will tell me with absolute certainty that the sky rests on the mountain. Look, there it is! But it is not there. It is a picture. So it is with the host of threats that keep the personal I in business. Lack, disease, rivalry, condemnation, accident, age. They come with credentials, with headlines, with family history, with professional vocabulary. They say, we are law, we are cause. And the personal I, believing the tale, straps on its armor and commences a life of management. But this is precisely the spell. The very belief that an appearance has law gives the appearance its only seeming power. Don't ever misunderstand what I'm saying. I am not telling you to ignore conditions with a silly smile. I am telling you to discern their nature. You are not being asked to fight a second power. You are being trained to see that there is no second power to fight. Now, tie this to identity and watch the whole structure come into view. The personal I itself, the sense of being a self apart, a second center, is an appearance. It is the master picture. It feels solid because for years we have fed it our faith. We have accepted its premise and then built a civilization of worry to protect it. Laws of chance, laws of contagion, laws of dwindling time, laws of hard men and scarce bread. But if God is infinite, where could these second laws originate? From what mind? From what cause? There could be none, and there is none. The I that trembles before them is the same picture that projects them. As is and am. There is not God and a frightened self. There is God as individualized being, and the fear belongs to a premise that never was. But what of cruelty? What of injustice? Now listen with care. To call error unreal is not to excuse a single unkind act. It is to refuse to grant cruelty the status of law, the dignity of permanence, or the authority of a second cause. When you meet injustice from the standpoint of two powers, you will either hate or fear and add to the sum of noise. When you meet it as appearance, recognized, named, but not enthroned, you bring to it the only solvent, realized presence. You will still act. You will still speak. You will still give bread and lift the fallen. But you will not be hypnotized by the picture. Do you see that? Compassion becomes clear, clean, unafraid, because it is God moving as you, rather than a panicked I trying to fix God's world. Therefore, when you hear the engines of worry start up, control, force, prediction, manipulation, remember, you are adjusting the rails in the distance, straightening the horizon with your hands, propping up a sky that never touched the hill. It cannot be done because it need not be done. Discernment replaces struggle. Instead of wrangling with a shadow, you withdraw consent from its claim to law and rest in what is. Let me sit here and abide in thy presence. In that stillness, the picture loosens, the manager retires, and peace, the natural climate of oneness, announces itself, not as improved circumstances first, but as quiet authority. And out of that quiet, right action appears of itself, because life is eyesing as you. Do you follow that? Now we come to the pivot on which all the rest swings. Prayer. Not prayer as the world knows it, begging, bargaining, arranging, but prayer as communion. Now mark this well, because it is going to be a very, very important point in your life if you catch it. Peace is not produced by getting life to cooperate with your plans. Peace is revealed by communion with what already is. Do you see that? As long as you are striving to convince God to adjust a picture, you are enthroning the picture, and you are enthroning the asker. But when you slip beneath the picture into presence, when you enter what is, the personal I finds it has nothing left to manage, and the war is over. Don't ever misunderstand what I'm saying. I am not asking you to stop praying. I am asking you to stop petitioning. Why? Because God is not withholding anything, and therefore God cannot give you anything. God just is. God is ising all the time. All that God is the substance of being, already the law and life of your identity. What would you have God add to infinity? Where would God put it? There is not God and a needy you. There is God expressed as you. So what is prayer? Let me sit here and abide in thy presence. Not to change conditions, but to be where conditions cannot dominate consciousness. But, and here comes that terrible, terrible word, but I need help. Yes, of course, I know the cry. But listen, help is not an added supply. Help is realized presence. Help is the light already in the room when you pull the shade. You do not import a sun, you open the shutter. You do not twist God's arm. You become still long enough to know God as the only arm. Then what we call help appears as wisdom in the moment, as order to your affairs, as sufficiency right where you are standing. Do you see that? It is not a new power, it is the one recognized. How do we do this? We retire a minute, or 5, or an hour, often, without an agenda. We set the case, the person, the condition, outside the door of consciousness. Father, thou art. No more. We do not describe the problem to omniscience. We do not try to feel holy. We rest and rest and rest until thought quiets, until there is a soft sense here of aliveness not belonging to a private self. Sometimes it is a hush, sometimes a lift, sometimes nothing at all but a deep okayness. That is communion. In that atmosphere, the rails that seem to meet no longer require you to straighten them. The horizon does not need your hands. Now from that communion you will find movement, calls to make, bread to share, words to speak, but not as a frightened fixer. Action emerges without a personal center driving it. That is, I live, yet not I, beginning to function. And because we are practical in this class, we will next ask, what does that feel like at the breakfast table, at the office, on the street? We must not leave this as lovely language. We will describe the safer self that acts when the asker grows still. For now, take this with you tonight. We want nothing of God but the joy of communion. Acquaint thyself with him, and be at peace. As is and am, abide, and the unnecessary I dissolves of itself. Do you see that? Now what remains when you do what we have been doing? When you sit down, close the door, withdraw the case, and let the petitioner grow quiet. Not a blank, not a vacancy, a presence, a quiet I-ness that is not the noisy manager, but the livingness of being itself, felt here, intimate as breath, and yet wonderfully impersonal, free of the private story, free of the yank and pull of me. It does not announce itself with trumpets. It does not rush to arrange the furniture of your life. It simply is. And in its isness, there is a stability, a settledness, that says without words, I am. Do you see that? Don't ever misunderstand what I'm saying. This is not the extinction of individuality. This is the end of separation. The tumbler does not vanish when you recognize it as glass. It becomes safe as glass. So with you. When the personal I relaxes its grip, true individuality appears, innocent, unforced, spontaneous. Not a self-will straining for outcomes, but the divine qualities individualized. Love as natural warmth and inclusion. Intelligence as apt judgment and quiet creativity. integrity as rightness without effort, courage as steadiness without bravado, beauty as order and grace without preening. These move as you, not because a little I is producing them, but because being is expressing as you. As is and am. There is not God and you. There is God as you. Is that right? Why do I say safer? Because nothing here depends on applause, on the weather of circumstance, on the shifting sands of opinion, on the fragile success of plans. The personal I is safe only when conditions line up and people behave. It must control or it panics. But this I-ness we are speaking of is rooted in being, not in conditions. It is like the ocean that does not come and go with the waves. Loss and gain pass on the surface. The depth remains. You may change employment, lose a possession, be praised or blamed in tomorrow's mail, and yet the core is untouched because it is not built out of those materials. It is built of is. It is God being being. Do you see that? Take this into your thought until it seals. Not my peace, peace. Not my life, life. Not my supply, supply. Not my safety, safety. Not my love, love. Not my wisdom, wisdom. All that God is the fabric of identity, and identity is God expressing as. Therefore, you do not draw peace from a bucket you carry. You stand in peace, and it flows. You do not store up safety like grain in a barn. You recognize safety as the nature of omnipresence, and you rest. You do not manufacture love to meet a situation. Love announces itself as your tone, and situations arrange themselves within it. Now mark this well, because this is going to be very, very important in your life if you catch it. This recognition does not perpetuate itself without attention. The old claimant will be back in 5 minutes, clipboard in hand, newsfeed in pocket, ready to reclaim the throne. The world will present its pictures and its but. All right. Then you must practice. You must return and return and return often. Begin again with God. Withdraw the case. Let the asker be still. As is and am. Rest until that quiet I-ness is sensed again, if only as a feather's weight. And then move from there. If you do not, you will be living by the weather again before noon. If you do, you will find that life lives, wisdom functions, love acts, through you, as you, yet not as a frightened I. I live, yet not I. That is safety. That is home. Do you see that? Now we must come to the plain work that keeps this from floating off as a lovely idea and leaves it as a living state. Treatment. Daily treatment. Now mark this well, because this is going to be a very, very important point in your life if you catch it. You will not go anywhere in this work if you start your treatment with any other word than God. Not the problem, not the person, not the symptom. God. The moment you take the problem into thought as the first word, you have enthroned it. You have asked it to dictate the terms of your prayer. Do you see that? So the first move is always the same. Drop the case, and let the first word be God. What do we mean by that? We mean God is. Not somewhere else, not later, not if. God as the only presence, the only power, the only cause, the only substance, the only law, the only life. Sit quietly with that until those words cease being syllables and begin to be atmosphere. Let them be true here. God is Ising. All that God is the ground of being right where I am. Not God and something. Not God and a situation. One. As is and am. Then, second, realize, not declare by rote, realize that what God is constitutes identity. The law of God is the law of my being. The substance of God is the substance of my being. Therefore, there is no other law operating, no second cause acting, no rival substance forming. This isn't personal flattery, it's metaphysical necessity. There is not glass and a tumbler, there is glass as tumbler. There is not God and you, there is God expressed as you. Let that click. Do you see that? Third, bring the claim to the light and see it for what it is, an appearance without law. Whether it calls itself fear of being disrespected, fear of losing a position, fear of being misunderstood, it is an ego image asking you to feed it. Protect me, prove me, advertise me. It threatens you with pictures, the boss's face, the closed door, the rumor. Watch what it does. It hurries you into managing. Now stop and say within, this is a picture, a suggestion, a hypnotic claim. It has no cause, no law, no substance. Like car tracks seeming to meet, like the sky on the mountain, it persuades without authority. Don't ever misunderstand what I'm saying. This is not positive thinking. This is not denying human needs. This is refusing to grant reality and law to a hypnotic picture. Fourth, rest. Be still and let realization do the work. Do not argue with the picture. Do not will a change. Abide. Father, thou art. Stay until the atmosphere shifts, even a little featherweight of rightness. In that hush, the personal I, the asker, the defender, has nothing to do. And in that very absence, peace appears as the natural climate, and right action presents itself unforced, a word to speak, a call to make, a silence to keep. Life moves, yet not a private me. Now, frequency. If you reserve this for crises, you will starve between feasts. Do this daily, and then many times daily when the old claimant flares. In the morning, begin with God. At noon, begin with God. When you feel the heat rise after a slight or a rumor, withdraw a minute, drop the case, begin with God. Persist. If you do not break through, return again and again until you do. Accept your responsibility and go to work on that case every single day of the week, especially the case called me. Start with God, see the claim as lawless appearance, and rest. Do this until not I becomes your normal. Then peace will not visit. You will discover it was the home you never left. Do you see that? Now we must walk this right out the door and onto the pavement of your day. This is not a sanctuary trick to be performed in quiet rooms only. The measure of realization is what happens when the news feed lights up, when the voice in the next room rises, when the body twinges, when the bill is due, and when you meet a stranger on the corner. Now mark this well. Living, yet not I, does not withdraw from the world. It meets the world from a consciousness not hypnotized by appearances. Do you see that? You open the headlines and they shout war, cruelty, collapse. The old reflex leaps, fear, rage, arguments to post. But do not let the picture draft you into its army. Retire for 1 minute. Father, thou art. God, the only presence, the only power, the only law. Let that be true here, not later. Then lift the scene in your consciousness. Do not deny it. Do not swallow it whole. Recognize. What parades as inevitability is a picture, a suggestion without divine law. Hold to one. In that quiet, clarity replaces heat. You may be moved to send aid, to write a clear letter, to stand up and speak, but not with hatred, not as a second power battling a second power. Action, yes. Panic, no. Fewer arguments, more light. Is that right? At the kitchen table, a loved one strikes a sore place, and the manager inside reaches for armor. All right. Breathe. God is. Drop the case. Refuse the bait of being a separate center that must win. Listen from within. Out of that stillness, words come that are not barbed, or a silence that is not sulking, or a boundary that is firm without spite. The temperature drops. You discover that not I does not roll over. It stands steady. It is not passivity. It is potency free of poison. A symptom taps the body and the horror movie begins. Diagnosis by search engine. Calendar of worst-case tomorrows. Now stop. Begin with God. The law of life is the law of my being. See the sensation as a picture clamoring for law it does not possess. Abide until the clutch eases. Then, hear this, right action may still appear. Rest, a call, a walk, a consultation. But it will arise without terror, and you will not obey a picture. You will follow wisdom. A bill arrives and the stomach flips. The old program says, scramble, hoard, hurry. Instead, Father, thou art. Supply is not coins in a box. Supply is the activity of being as is and am. Rest in that. Then steps appear. A call made with dignity. Work done with excellence. An opening you could not have forced. And often the strangest companion to freedom. Generosity. You find yourself giving where fear would have clutched. And the flow answers flow. Do you see that? And on the street corner, a man limping, a woman with a cardboard sign. Don't ever misunderstand what I'm saying. Do not pass by with indifference, and do not be hypnotized into despair. Lift them in your consciousness. God is the life of this one. There is no law of abandonment in infinity. Stay a breath until the inner atmosphere shifts. Then perhaps a word, bread, a look that confers worth, or perhaps quiet blessing and moving on. But nothing sentimental and nothing superior. Compassion, clean and unafraid. Now the fear comes. But if I live, not I, will I go soft? Here comes that terrible, terrible word. But no, not I is not apathy. It is authority. It is the end of jittery self-importance and the beginning of right action rising from communion. Sometimes it will be a strong no, sometimes a tender yes, sometimes a simple, faithful next step. Always, it will be from home, not from exile. And that brings us to our promise. Peace is not an interlude between emergencies. It is the climate of being home in thee while the world whirls. We will name that now, and let it settle as the ground of your days. Now we come home. Not farther out into concepts, not into better strategies for the clever I, but home. And please mark this well, because it is the gentlest and most liberating point we have. The prodigal does not become a better prodigal. He does not learn superior management of husks. He returns. He returns with nothing but recognition. I am home in thee. Do you see that? The Father does not negotiate. The Father embraces. The robe, the ring, the shoes are not wages earned. They are identity restored. That is peace. Not a passing mood, not a sweet feeling that visits on good weather days. Peace is the absence of inner division, the cessation of the argument between what is and what I want, between God is and but I think. It is the end of the civil war at the center. How do we touch it? Here? Now? Very simply. Not by force, not by eloquence, not by 1,000 words. A little cadence of return. Father, thou seest me. Father, thou knowest. Father, thou art here. Then rest, rest, rest. No embroidery, no pleading, no managing the universe. Rest until the breath is unlabored, until the mind ceases its bargaining, until there is just a sense, soft but real, that being is present as is and am. In that hush, the personal asker is not needed, and the house is quiet because the true host is recognized. Acquaint thyself with him, and be at peace. Do you see that? Don't ever misunderstand what I'm saying. This does not mean conditions freeze into a storybook. Bills may still arrive. The body may still signal. The world may still parade its grievances. All right. But they no longer define identity. They are not the law of your being. They are claims presented to consciousness, pictures to be met, not powers to be feared. The sky does not truly rest on the mountain just because the eye swears it does. So you meet each picture with the same return. Begin with God. Know the claim as appearance without law, and rest. Then action can appear cleanly. Quiet calls, honest labor, wise boundaries, without panic, without the manager shouting orders. I live, yet not I. Life lives. Wisdom functions. Love acts. Now feel the relief of this. The shoulders drop because there is nothing left to carry. You are not responsible for holding up a sky that never touched the hill. You are responsible for one thing only: returning, again and again, to realized oneness. As is and am. And in that returning, a habit forms, a climate stabilizes. Peace ceases to be an intermission between emergencies and becomes the very atmosphere in which events come and go. The prodigal stops auditing the barn. The son abides in the house. Therefore, let this be your simple rule of day and night. When the but rises, that terrible, terrible word, answer it with home. Father, thou seest me. Father, thou knowest. Father, thou art here. Then rest. Let the manager sit down. Let the presence be presence. In a moment I am going to lay a final charge upon you, but hear this as the hinge on which it will turn. This peace is not rare. It is natural. It flowers as you consent to live without a separate center, to surrender the personal I, and to practice communion until not I is no longer a visit, but your address. Home in thee. Is that right? Now here is the charge, and I want you to feel the weight and the warmth of it together. This is not entertainment. This is not a pleasant hour's diversion. A class is a sacred, sacred, sacred undertaking, because it touches the hopes of your life and the lives entwined with yours. Now mark this well, because this is going to be very, very important if you catch it. God is infinite. Therefore, there is no second presence, no rival power, no extra center. Therefore, the personal I that tries to manage life is a false center, a picture without law. Therefore, when that I yields to realized oneness, I live, yet not I, peace is inevitable, not as a rare visitor, but as climate. Do you see that? All right. Then do not play with this. Do not dabble. Practice. Set aside periods, morning and evening at the least, 5, 10, 15 minutes, not to get things, not to move chessmen on the board of conditions, but to commune. Father, thou art. Sit until the atmosphere shifts, even slightly, from managing to being. No petition, only presence, as is and am. In the middle hours, when the old claimant rises, the heat in a conversation, the clutch in the stomach at a bill, the twitch to argue at the news, catch it and return. 3 breaths. God is. Drop the case out of thought. Let the presence be presence. Repeat this 100 quiet times if needed. That is the work. Don't ever misunderstand what I'm saying. This is not grim willpower, and it is not magic. It is faithfulness to what is. And here is what you will observe, not as fireworks, but as weather changing. Discord loses grip. The mind does not take the bait so quickly. A relationship softens where it was all edges. Words appear you could not have forced. Silences hold you could not have kept. Fear, that old tyrant of 2 in the morning, weakens. Its stories feel less official. Guidance becomes clearer, not as shouts, but as that plain inner rightness. Call now. Wait. Apologize. Take the next step. Leave that alone. Supply shows up as sufficiency where you stand. Action is cleaner. And through all this, a steadiness begins to make its home. Peace as ground, not prize. Is that right? Now, discipline. For the next 30 days, take this as your sacred appointment. Morning and evening, sit and abide. In the day, answer every but with home. Father, thou seest me. Father, thou knowest. Father, thou art here. Then rest. If you miss, begin again at once. If the old I grabs the wheel, smile, unhook its hands, and begin with God. Persist until the personal center no longer governs your tone, your choices, your seeing. If you do not, you will be back in the weather before noon. If you do, peace will stop arriving and start remaining. And let this be your benediction, not as ornament for your wall, but as breath for your hours. I live, yet not I. Christ liveth my life. Let that be lived, not merely believed. The Christ, not a person, but the realized presence, the I of your being, lives your life as you, as is and am. Go now and practice until this is normal, until the prodigal no longer manages husks, but abides in the house. Acquaint thyself with him, and be at peace. Do you see that?